So upon the conduction of our audience feedback, the next stage was to now review back over the information that was given to us by our target audience in order for our group to gain an insight to how well the construction and overall outcome of our final products were, in order to gain an overall understanding of how well we addressed our target audiences in terms of appeal and attraction, as well as finding out if they understood the narrative and genre presented to them, allowing us to overall determine how successful our free media products were. With the information gained back from our target audience, our group can then see the best features of our work in terms of presentation, mise-en-scène, genre, narrative, characters, and see overall how well we created our free media products, seeing whether they were all a success, or perhaps areas that they felt needed much improving upon, and thus determining the overall quality of our final pieces. So the first stage that I shall be talking about is the use of representation, and regarding this part, our audiences somewhat came about a little confused regarding some of the characters' roles within the teaser, where they were able to identify one unlike the other. I'm referring to how the protagonist was identified almost immediately. However, the antagonist was a little more different. However, the audiences spoke about the antagonist and thought it was presented a little more differently compared to what we desired for our production. So, beginning with the positive note, our target audiences were able to successfully identify the role of the protagonist, Eve, in which they have identified to be the princess in relation back to Vladimir Zbrov's character theory, in which she's presented to be the overall weakest character, portrayed to be hunted and terrorised by the antagonist, to which she is powerless and helpless to fight against the mind of the antagonist in the form of the messages. Audiences were able to identify with the protagonist and spoke about her being a student, which was a highly successful aspect for us, for our intended desire for the central protagonist. We met expectations and was successfully able to be identified by our audiences, showing that they were able to relate back to the central character. The use of the mise-en-scène creates a sense of resemblance, as they commented upon the use of props such as the iPhone and the references to social media, something that fits within their lifestyles and is quite pleasurable interest to them. The audience did suggest that the central character is quite young throughout the use of the prop scene used in the trailer. That seemed to be quite relevant towards their interests and effective in capturing the audience's attention and interest, and thus engaging them into the media piece. Showing that we were able to successfully represent her in a way that meets the approval of our target audience, as she's clearly relatable and meets the lifestyles and interests of our intended target audiences, creating a good connection between her and us, and thus making a connection between them and the text seeming more open and inviting to them. However, regarding the antagonist, a majority of our target audiences spoke about the human form of the antagonist, such as the use of the form of Ellie or the Dark Stranger in the Night. And this wasn't the intended representation that we sought to present, and it showed that our target audience failed to seek the deeper meaning of the messages, actually being in the form of paranormal forces. So it basically shows us that they failed to decode this meaning of the character's role within the teaser. So they failed to register who exactly what the messages were and what part they played within the narrative. In response towards this, however, we did aim to try and make this meaning more communicative and effective for our audiences to establish this through some features such as the mise-en-scène and the idea of using low-key lighting to connote the sense of sinister darkness happening. Yet, unfortunately, this was a failed meaning to be read for our media piece, creating the idea that the use of the character portrayal was difficult to read and thus hard to form an understanding of the roles within the teaser. This suggests to us that another improvement may have been needed to be rectified in order to clearly establish that the messages was exactly the form of the antagonist derived from the paranormal forces. This meaning would be able to convey the antagonist more effectively, and maybe our audience then would be able to see that in fact it wasn't the human presence that was affecting the main protagonist, but it was actually in the form of paranormal forces derived from the messages. I think it would convey a more sinister effect and perhaps give that atmosphere of dark danger and sinister happenings within the narrative. I believe this would have been effective in communicating the paranormal presence within the film, rather than probably the use of using human characters, where hopefully it would not lead to confusion the next time. So the next feature that I shall be talking about is the identification of the media product and what this is. So regarding this part, it was vital that our group was able to produce the intended product that we set out to create in order to successfully reach and meet our target audience's wants and needs that fits within their interests to set up their appeal. To seek the answer to this question, our group asked our audience members, what type of product do you think this media product is and why do you think this? Regarding the answers, it was clear that they instantly decoded our intended product and identified it as a teaser trailer for an upcoming movie that shall be soon to be released. Many commented upon the use of titles throughout the production, which was a giveaway to suggest that it was a teaser for a promotional piece that intended to distribute, inform, entertain our audiences. The social media link giveaway is part of the thriller. The social media links is part of the thriller given to us by one of our audience members, in which the use of this term sets directly into their lifestyles, which would have been seen as identifiable and relatable to them, as they are exposed to such medias throughout their lives daily. Referring back to the term social media, this would have been easily accepted by our audience members and would have instantly suggested to them what our intended media product was. It was allowed them to easily distribute the featured film to construct a wider fan base for our film's name, Eve. I believe that the use of the titles was the biggest giveaway and suggests to us that post-production stages was used effectively to the best of our skills and abilities to do so. The fact that our post-production skills were noticed suggests that it was a vital part of the identification of our media product and would have left audiences confused as to what we were showing them at the start of the focus group process. The use of titles being easily identifiable shows understanding amongst the audiences of this highly conventional aspect of teaser trailers, conveying the success and conforming to the conventions in order to present a recognisable product in correlation to the already established ones. One commented that the use of titles made the production look very professional, which was an effective response for us, as we were able to make our product look authentic and real for them, making viewing more pleasant. This increases the chances of success overall upon the release. Another aspect that was used in the identification of our media product was the use of editing skills, such as the jump cuts, revealing the audience's understanding of the conventional nature of the teaser structure. So, one commented that the build-up continues. That the build-up and the continuous jump cuts made the narrative quite jumpy, which connotes the feeling that we were trying to show snippets of something to communicate and appeal to them. This reveals the audience's understanding of our media piece within the conventional nature of the teaser structure, and thus shows the success of how we were successfully able to show what we intended to create, with which throughout the use of post-productions of titles and editing skills was able to successfully create a media piece of a teaser trailer that was easily decoded by our audiences. Ultimately, the lack of responses in regards to mise-en-scène shows the areas for need of improvement, in which we needed to rectify upon in order to make the piece a lot more identifiable to audiences, suggesting an area in which we may needed to have focused more upon for audiences to take note of this throughout the production stages, rather than identify the teaser throughout the process of post-production only. So, moving on to genre, I believe that regarding this piece, our audience's members were successfully able to decode and identify the intended genre we set out to create. So they successfully identified it as a horror within a narrative of our teaser trailer correctly. One member used the words building tension after watching the teaser, justifying their words by stating it was effective in building up this hype throughout the use of jump cuts. This specific technique was used throughout the teaser intended to jump scare our audiences, showing that it was effective in grabbing the audiences and stimulating fear from them. This allowed them to engage with our narrative and become more a part of it, stating that the narrative messes with your head, which we find a successful thing to make audiences feel throughout watching our teaser trailer. It's also a conventional feature that we intended to set out as well, showing us that the overall presentation of the communicated genre did go down a success as all members within the focus group was able to identify the horror genre throughout such features such as the building intention, which was one of the main things that our group did set out to do and did correctly. One group of the audience members specifically commented upon the use of intensive sound, stimulating fear throughout watching the film's content, which suggests the impression that throughout audio we were able to capture our audience's attention and most successfully create that climax for them. Sound is a very important thing for us to create throughout the post-production stages. We made sure that we aired a continuous flow throughout the teaser, as well as incorporating sound effects to denote the significant scenes, so it doesn't distract the audiences, nor does it interfere with the pieces of footage we had edited onto the film's timeline. We took most time editing the sound on this, considering it is one of the most dominant and essential features seen on the teaser trailer as displayed throughout my research. So, additionally, one member of our target within our audience focus group was even able to successfully identify the submerged genre within our horror narrative, saying horror bordering on psychological thriller, showing that we managed to successfully communicate this well throughout the narrative. And it also shows that our audiences had a broad understanding of what we set out to present. So from the feedback regarding our genre from our audience members, it can be said that the way we tried to present the genre was effective for us, as our audiences were able to successfully decode the genre as what we were trying to present to them. They experienced such emotions as fear and psychological messings throughout watching the film, which we believe is a success of our piece as we set out to meet the expectations and conventions of what the horror genre is presented within the film's industry. Another aspect of establishing the genre would be throughout the use of post-production skills, in which we incorporated such techniques as the jump cuts in order to simulate fear for our audiences throughout the teaser, making the media piece more visually engaging but also fear-inducing. The use of jump cuts was rather effective and allowed our audiences to establish the build-up and tension from the piece that we used throughout the trailer, which the character Eve seemed to be accessing the messages throughout mysterious sources derived from paranormal forces. The use of jump cuts connotes sinister happenings as well as drawings. The use of jump cuts connotes sinister happenings as well as drawing audiences into the use of characters' roles, such as the protagonist Eve, as well as the antagonist of the messages forming throughout the trailer. Jump cuts was effective for keeping audiences tense and on the edge of their seats, especially nearing the end, where they do see that the character Eve is in danger as she's being chased. The use of jump cuts was a great way of displaying and communicating our genre to our audiences, in which it helped to set up and understand narrative, as well as build up tension and emotions. This technique of using jump cuts was effective in allowing my audiences to establish a genre for themselves. So another aspect that allowed audiences to recognise the genre was the use of structure within the teaser, following a narrative in which was effective for communicating to our audiences that the plot contained horror elements within the media text, due to the climatic scenes that allowed each bit to build up to that desired tension for us to be able to communicate that it is the genre horror. Again, this can be a conventional aspect. We had incorporated that overall again, this can be another conventional aspect. We had incorporated that and overall was the success of our piece, for which audiences can fully identify the horror within this piece. These two aspects, being the audio and the use of jump cuts, was mostly spoken about with our audience members. creating the impression that these were the most successful pieces that we incorporated for them to fully understand and identify and make assumptions on what genre they thought it was. So I believe, yes, these two key features was a success, and it was able to communicate our desired genre that we set out to construct. I think the fact that our audience members neglected to tell us about other features such as the mise-en-scène or the use of the camera kind of like indicates to me that perhaps this is not very muchly focused upon, and probably didn't seep out as much to audiences to say that this teaser is a horror. So I believe this could be an area of improvement that our group could actually work upon, and probably try and formulate more betterly understood ideas into how, using the use of camera shots or mise-en-scène, that we can fully establish the intended genre that we set out to create. So regarding the narrative, audiences were able to successfully decode the communication of our narrative. However, some were still being unable to decipher what exactly happens throughout the teaser, stating that it was effective, but you didn't know what was going to happen next, which suggests to me that we were able to encode a narrative the right way, for which audiences were able to decode and deconstruct in order to gain an understanding towards what is happening throughout the trailer, but also keep things deliberately uncertain to keep that arousal of suspicion and alert. So again, quite a conventional feature to be used and incorporated throughout the teaser, and definitely something that our audiences picked up on. I think this used the idea where they picked up on some areas in order to fully understand the plot, but didn't know exactly to say with confidence what would happen next. Kind of conforms to the theory, Bartek's Enigma code theory, in which parts have been encoded for the audience to decode and understand, yet as part of the Enigma code it leaves out deliberate information to make the piece seem more engaging and thrilling. So as part of the Enigma code theory, it encodes text for the narrative, for the audiences to decode, however deliberately leaves parts out deliberately for the narrative text to seem more engaging and thrilling to our audiences. I believe that this theory we more or less conform to throughout the teaser, in which parts were left unclear, and it leaves the audiences continuing to guess what happened, enticing them into the text itself. I believe that another aspect regarding narrative we used was in order to gather their understanding and overall thoughts. I believe that another aspect involved in narrative was gaining an understanding to how well our audiences understood the media text presented to them, and overall seeing if the plot was easy to decipher and nothing was left unclear for them. Overall, after evaluating this part, I would have to say that the overall knowledge and understanding of the storyline was very clear for them, as they were successfully able to decode parts. Some members said that the build-up towards the end made the plot easy to follow, and you get a sense of what's going to happen next. So this suggests to me that my audiences were able to follow our narrative easy and had no problems in understanding. It gave them an idea of the build-up of what our film narrative is expected to show, giving them a taste of what is about to happen. This successful communication suggests to me that we were able to compose a narrative to an extent, in which it was easy to follow for them, showing me that audience members were easily able to decode the narrative that we encoded for them. So for the audience feedback that we did receive, we more or less were able to identify that we conform to the Todos narrative theory, in which 5 stages was to be used in order to communicate the narrative across to our audiences effectively. So Todorow's 5-stage narrative theory includes 5 stages set within a narrative. This includes the equilibrium, disruption, disequilibrium, recognition of the problem, and a new equilibrium. One member stated that it remained a certain One audience member stated that there was a certain chronological order in which the narrative seemed easy to follow. Throughout the research, I more or less found that most plots followed the Todorow's 5-stage theory, indicating to me that my audience members were easily able to identify this, the trailer through this, and was able to apply the 5 stages towards the teaser trailer, in which they were able to establish the start of the equilibrium, where even Jess is walking home, and then the disruption, where she receives her first message, and also the recognition and attempt to restore, where she continually gets them and begins to get paranoid with the arrival of these in a dark and more sinister format. This allowed us to build up a sense of danger and suspicion within the film's plot, and again, that was all that was needed to help build up the tension in order to establish the film's narrative. I believe that due to us making a teaser, we needed to make certain parts, we needed to make certain that we broke up the stages in order to not give away the plot easily, especially as it was a teaser trailer we intended to create, and we want to more or less tease instead of inform what the narrative was about. So we want to keep things unfinished to help keep audiences' suspicions up, but still keep them in the dark, to keep them guessing but also enticed. So we were able to use the first 3 stages of this theory in order to demonstrate a story plot, yet left the plot unanswered, leaving the audiences unaware of what was going to happen next. Quite a successful aspect in the production of our teaser trailer, as it allowed audiences to desire more knowledge regarding the narrative, especially how we left the teaser with the character Eve attempting to run away from the antagonist, but failing to do so by tripping and falling up on the floor, leaving her in a weak and vulnerable position, leaving audiences to then determine what could possibly be the fate of the protagonist, especially how we jump cut away to a blank screen and all we can hear is the diegetic sound of a scream. So it kind of drives them into a frenzy as to what will happen, and kind of establish that relationship between audience and central character. So I believe that ultimately, referring back to Todorow's 5-stage theory, we were unable to follow exactly the 5 stages completely due to the teaser trailer giving the narrative away, and we wanted to keep the narrative still fresh and exciting for our audiences, yet still keeping that mystery to keep them guessing and suspicious. So I believe we were still able to create that sense of hype and excitement, which was all conventional features and engaging our targeted audiences, exciting yet thrilling them throughout our desired teaser trailer. So in conclusion, I have managed to summarise the main responses and opinions from the media products gained by my audience feedback upon the main production. So we were successfully able to our target audience members were successfully able to identify the main strengths and weaknesses of my constructed products, and how well they related to one another in regards towards genre and narrative. In conclusion, I've managed to summarise the main responses and opinions from the media products gained by my audience feedback regarding the teaser trailer throughout the focus group. Our target audience was successfully able to identify the main strengths and weaknesses of my constructed product, and was able to comment upon how successfully they related back to one another in regards towards genre and narrative. I believe that from the completion of this evaluation task, I've been able to identify and understand what my flaws were, and what could have perhaps been improved to enhance my products, as well as identifying the key strengths and actions I carried out for the success of each of my creative products.